56% of all corporate Bitcoin buys happened in the last few months. I just can't see the stair step up. The thing that's most likely to happen is what inflicts the most pain on the most number of people. And that is that everyone misses the boat. It seems like we're reaching corporate FOMO, we're going to get nation state FOMO, and then retail FOMO. And all of that's going to mean a very steep adoption curve.
ETFs now hold 1.4 million coins. It's got people screaming on Twitter, there's got to be paper Bitcoin. Hundreds of millions of dollars being purchased. Why isn't the price exploding?
There could be something shady happening. We just don't know. In the FTX case, we found out after the fact that they were selling Bitcoin that they didn't have, and that could contribute to this. The other theory is that it's simply there's not really much else to say. BlackRock is the largest asset manager on the planet, and Bitcoin is their new unicorn, so to speak. And if that doesn't convince you, then nothing else can.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and today I am very grateful to be joined by Samson Mow, CEO of Jan3, the Bitcoin technology company, one of the world's leading experts in Bitcoin nation-state adoption, and I would say, respectfully, one of Bitcoin's most loved perma bulls. Samson, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Rob. Great to be on again.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us. Yes. So you are constantly traveling the world. You were just in Prague, traveling around Europe for the conference there. You know what Bitcoin nation-state adoption is. And just a couple months ago in March, we had the strategic Bitcoin Reserve executive order. But since then, it's been a little bit quiet. And you've put out a warning saying that America needs to act now, or we might have other people come and catch up to us. So what do you think is going on in terms of the nation-state race, and what should America do right now?
Well, I think right now America should buy Bitcoin because it's almost on sale. Like anything under 0.5 million a coin, I would say is a good deal. And I'm just in disbelief that we're still at these prices now, given the amount of just incredible accumulation from all the corporate Bitcoin treasury companies, as well as the telegraphing of plans from nation states to buy. So, if I was the US, I would buy now, especially given the big, beautiful bill passing. And that's just going to increase the debt and deficit.
Yeah, it does seem as if the new plan is to accelerate, right? The attempts to cut back have not gone so well. Elon is gone. And so now we're just going to blow out the debt and hopefully have technology come and save us. But one interesting thing I heard today was Bo Hines, who's an advisor to Trump now about crypto and digital assets. He was talking to Fred Thiel of Mara, and they said that there might be some play for a public-private relationship between the American government and Bitcoin miners. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting for sure. I would say mining has always been more or less predestined to have a significant amount being done by sovereign entities, simply because they control the energy. And they need mining effectively to balance the grid and to balance the operations and supply and demand. So there will always be private miners. There will be people mining at home with bit axes. But I think a large part of the network will just be either public-private partnerships or just government-owned utilities mining because they have nothing better to do with their electricity.
And has this been an easy way to talk to governments about Bitcoin?
It's never easy to talk to governments about Bitcoin. So I guess your question earlier was, what's the general state of things? And I would say the general state is very encouraging and optimistic. But as always, it's challenging to get nation-state Bitcoin adoption. Most countries are very democratic in nature, whereby there's a good separation of power. No one party has control over the legislature or Senate, and you have to kind of get buy-in from all the different groups. And of course, there are different groups within every government vying for power, influence, and control. So at any given time, you're fighting against this natural inertia. But at the same time, all the governments are always dealing with some crisis in some form or fashion, either of their own making or from some externality. So it's very difficult, I think, to get governments to come on board. And we've kind of seen that in our efforts over the past few years at Jan3. We get meetings, but the meetings albeit encouraging, are usually just a step in the right direction, but without any concrete action. And I think it's to do with those reasons I outlined before. And that's kind of shifted our strategy a bit lately. So we've tried to take a different approach of actually doing things with governments instead of proposing things and hoping that they will follow through on their own. So we're proposing things like creating sandboxes to facilitate Bitcoin adoption in very small, specific, targeted regions. We started doing some groundwork for projects to start Bitcoin adoption, with maybe networks of ATMs or things in different countries too. So there's a lot of different things that we're trying differently now that are, I guess, supportive of the overall education and high-level engagement, but may lead to actual implementation of strategies faster than just pure engagement and discussion.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant to go with the sandbox approach. You start at a grassroots level. You show that a community really can thrive using Bitcoin in a circular economy, and then other communities around them want to copy it, right? Can you tell us about any exact locations that you're working with here?
Well, I don't want to go into too many specifics, but there has been some news out there already from Thailand. They announced the sandbox in Phuket, and that was from our early engagement and our proposal. But there's always something going on. If you follow the news about Thailand, there's some political turmoil right now, which kind of derails everything. Just like the U.S. was distracted with the conflict in the Middle East recently too, and I think for a lot of Bitcoiners, that's quite frustrating. Like, we're waiting to see the things that have been promised delivered, even something as basic as the audit of Fort Knox and seeing how much gold is there, right? These things have been discussed, but not necessarily delivered on. And this is why I think it's really important for the US, particularly, given that they've already started down this path, to execute on this direction, because there's not a lot of Bitcoin left. There's a very rapidly dwindling supply of Bitcoin, and all the corporates are now ramping up their acquisition strategies.
Yeah, and in the past, you said that a good goal for America would be around 200,000 Bitcoin, right? But now we see MicroStrategy with 3 times that. What kind of goals should America set for itself now in terms of Bitcoin accumulation?
Well, there's an aspirational goal and there's a realistic goal. I think the aspirational goal was 1 million with Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act, right? And RFK had talked about acquiring 2 million Bitcoin. But I think a more pragmatic goal would be something along the lines of MicroStrategy or Strategy 600,000 coins. I think that is still doable if implemented within the next year, so the next 12 months or so. Anything outside of that, your chances of accumulating hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin are rapidly dwindling. But again, circling back to the other point we made, like, we're still waiting to hear exactly how much Bitcoin the US has right now, because we don't even have that clear picture. And I believe a good chunk of the 200 some odd thousand coins purported to be in the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve actually belong to Bitfinex. So if that is the case, the US could have far less than 100,000 coins.
Yeah, and then they'd have to go scrambling, right? But I mean, just in the last 6 months or so, I mean, we're seeing headlines from everywhere, right? Taiwan, Pakistan, India, South Korea just got a pro-Bitcoin president. Poland as well. Nigel Farage in the UK, it looks like he might be coming in soon, and he's just been pro-Bitcoin. So do any of these countries really pique your interest?
I would say so, and we're particularly interested in some of those ones that you mentioned, and we do have some engagements there, albeit a bit early. But it's all very promising, and I think the lineup of interest is just paving the way for an Omega candle. Like, given all of these entrants are going to do something, it's really a question of when they act, and if they're all acting in the same time period, like in the same week, in the same month. And I think that's going to have a significant impact on the price.
Yeah, we could be seeing fireworks. It does seem as if it'll all probably happen all at once, right? And then we wake up in a different world.
Yeah. The biggest challenge, I think, is the governments are always distracted by something else. If the US was focused on executing on their Bitcoin strategy, I think they could have probably had something out the door already. But, the shift focused to the one big beautiful bill and other things. And I think these will have repercussions on the ability for the US to accumulate a significant sized reserve.
Yeah, and the other impediment in the world when it comes to Bitcoin accumulation on a nation state level, it seems to be the IMF. So we just saw that today with Pakistan. They had plans to use their surplus energy for Bitcoin mining, but the IMF came in and said, hey, not too fast. Let's take a closer look at this. So have you had any experience dealing with the IMF, and why do you think that they are such a big roadblock?
Well, I guess it depends on what your view is of the IMF. Like, are they a benevolent organization, or are they basically a loan shark? And if they are a loan shark, then they probably don't want countries actually getting out of debt so that they can keep on helping them. It's the incentive structure, right? If your organization exists to lend money, well, what happens when there's no one left to lend money to? You lose your job. And this is why countries keep electing socialist governments into power, because they keep on giving people free things. So they keep getting voted into power. But it's kind of the same thing on a more supranational scale with the IMF. So I don't think that it's in their interests as people working for this organization, or even the organization itself, that countries do move into implementing a Bitcoin strategy and stepping on their way to a path to repay the IMF.
Yeah, and speaking of the IMF and deals with them, we had El Salvador, the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. But come 2024, 2025, they had to acquiesce and make a deal with the IMF. The debt situation there became a bit untenable, and they needed a loan. And part of the deal of that loan was that they had to curtail their Bitcoin program, right? They had to stop purchasing Bitcoin, had to stop their mining, had to also shut down the Chivo wallet program. So you ruffled some feathers a couple months ago when you raised some questions just as to the legitimacy of the El Salvador's claims that they're still purchasing 1 Bitcoin a day. But the IMF comes out and says they're still within the rules of the agreement. So what is going on here, and why is it so important to figure out what's going on?
Well, generally, we're not supposed to talk about what's happening there, really, right? It's not it's frowned upon. But yeah, I did ruffle some feathers unknowingly and without the intention to. But I think a lot of Bitcoiners are curious about what's happening exactly, and the communications are very unclear. It's more like, trust me, or trust us. We're still a Bitcoin country and everything is great. But as Bitcoiners, I believe we are inclined to question things and try to seek clarity and answers, right? It's the whole premise of don't trust, verify. But it's not really clear what exactly is happening. President Bukele has said this, quote unquote, does not stop. I guess he's referring to their buying program. But it is very clear in the IMF agreement, which El Salvador agreed to, that they can't buy anymore, along with a number of other details like the unwinding of their fund to fuel the swaps between USD and BTC, as well as the Chivo wallet itself, like you mentioned. So you just have to choose who you want to believe. Either the IMF is lying, or the other is true.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. And while they definitely had to take a step back from some of their Bitcoin program, it does still seem like Bitcoin country in some regards, right? I mean, you can still, Bitcoin is still widely accepted in places like Bitcoin Beach and Berlin, of course, and there's still a wide population of Bitcoiners within the country. And I still think that the mission does live on in some regard. But the wallet Chivo is closing down by the end of this month, it seems. And so people aren't quite sure what's going to happen. Maybe they will sell it. Maybe Tether or Bitfinex, who's coming into the country, could purchase it. But you yourself are the CEO of a company with a Bitcoin wallet. So let's talk about that. Aqua, the adoption. It's been 1 year, right? Tell us the story. How's it been going?
It's a bit more than 1 year, but I would say the Aqua adoption story is going very well. We didn't expect it would take off so rapidly, but people love the concept of a simple, easy to use wallet that supports stablecoins, Bitcoin layer 2, and you can kind of swap between all these different layers. So we kind of hit a perfect product market fit on our first shot, which is pretty cool. And then we recently rolled out the beta of the Dolphin card. And again, that's seen a ton of interest from people. And again, to our surprise too. So we've kind of like hit two things out of the park on our first shot. And it's very encouraging, I would say. So the goal of Aqua is to create a simple wallet to onboard the next billion people to Bitcoin. That is the mission, full stop. And to do that, we need to be able to give people a utility which just simply works. It's their go-to wallet, their daily driver. They can use it to interact with different services, which we're adding more and more of. But the base use case is transacting Bitcoin. And one of our big target markets is Latin America, where stablecoin usage is almost, it's everybody almost. They need stablecoins to protect themselves from their currencies, which are rapidly inflating away. So we support swaps from Tether, other Tether chains into the Liquid chain. And recently the Liquid issuance, the Liquid Tether issuance has increased to 100 million on the Liquid blockchain. So that's a good sign that Liquid adoption is picking up, but it also adds more liquidity for swaps to go into Liquid. And in many ways, Liquid is a superior network for stablecoins because you have privacy through confidential transactions, and the fees are more predictable. It's like something like 3 cents, 3 or 4 cents a Tether transaction. Whereas on Tron, I think they're getting up to $2 a transaction now. But given that a big portion of our user base is in LATAM, it's really important that we do offer stablecoins. And even Bitcoiners that are well-traveled, they realize this, that you need to be able to interface with stablecoins. If you're traveling in Argentina, I think Peter McCormack had a trip down there, and he was saying if Aqua was launched at that time, he would have just been using it every day to pay people in Tether, because that's what the local people want.
Yeah, it does seem that way. That it seems Aqua really has blown up in Argentina, right? And they are some of the world's largest users of stablecoins, right? And so do you see that? Do you think that, especially in places like Latin America, that stablecoins are an on-ramp to Bitcoin?
I would say so. I mean, people are seeking to protect themselves and protect their savings. And they're just looking for a dollar, a digital dollar, and they don't really care what it is. If it is on a blockchain, that's great, but they need to be able to access it. And much of LATAM can't access dollars. There's not enough physical cash supply, and the banks, obviously are a bottleneck too, because they cannot bank everybody. That's why we have a few billion people in the world unbanked. So Tether USDT is like a godsend for people in LATAM that are seeing their savings eroded. So they naturally just seek it out and they start using it. And unfortunately, the bulk of it is on altcoin chains. But the goal of Aqua is to migrate them into Liquid. So it's a Bitcoin side chain. There is no native, the native token is Bitcoin, basically. Bitcoin pegged into the network. So there's no altcoin token. There's no tokenomics involved. You're just using a Bitcoin sidechain to transact stablecoins. It's just simple elegance.
And the way that the Dolphin card works is that you put on your Bitcoin and then you can spend in dollars, right?
Yeah. So you top up with either on-chain Bitcoin or Liquid Bitcoin for now, and we're about to add Liquid USDT. So you just top it up with whatever's in Aqua, and then you can spend up to $4,000 a month on a reloadable card.
And one of the coolest features, you don't need KYC to get this card, correct?
Well, you have to register with an email. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's pretty easy. And I just listened to a clip of you speaking with Preston Pish 4 years ago, and you said, "Where would you like to see Bitcoin go?" And you said more towards privacy. And so Liquid helps with that, right? With confidential transactions. But where do you think is the state of Bitcoin and privacy in 2025?
That's a interesting question. So I think Liquid helps with a lot of the privacy dimension of Bitcoin, as does Lightning. And in many ways, Aqua is like a superpower for this because you're going from Liquid Bitcoin into Lightning, which is even better than a lot of services right now where it's a Lightning wallet connected to an LSP that sees every transaction of yours. So they kind of know your behavior and your spending patterns and who you're sending to. So Aqua is better in many ways in that regard. But overall, I think right now we're at a bigger crossroads, which is Bitcoin just an asset for Bitcoin Treasury companies, or is it money for the world? And is it something people spend? And even within Bitcoiner circles, there's sort of a heated discussion where, people are saying you should never spend your Bitcoin, and the other faction is saying you have to spend it and you should spend and replace, because that's how people get Bitcoin. If you don't spend your Bitcoin, no one will accept it and adopt it and learn about it.
And where do you land on that spectrum?
Well, I think Bitcoin is both, and you have to be okay with people treating it as an asset. So there's no real direct parallel to this. If you look at gold, people were spending gold in history. They would spend it as gold coins and buy shoes with it or bread with it, or like lower derivatives of gold like silver and copper, right? But the main point is you would transact it and spend it, but at the same time, people do hoard it as well. And I think the difference is a bit more pronounced with Bitcoin because it's underpinning much of the financial system now, because it has to. Institutions, governments, corporations, they're all looking for a pristine asset that's not going to degrade and devalue over time. So that's why companies like Strategy and others are adding it to their balance sheet, and governments too. But at the same time, you have the rest of the world, which needs money. They need liquid money that can be spent to pay their suppliers, to pay vendors, to move around quickly, in addition to stablecoins too. But they're looking for something to use as money. So both sides are actively pushing both use cases, the medium of exchange and the store of value use case. So I think you'll see it end equilibrium where it does turn out to be both, and it is really good at being both things, and is not necessarily one or the other. And even if BlackRock and Strategy and others have a large holding of Bitcoin, you're always going to have Bitcoin in the wild and being used by ordinary people to spend and use in their daily life.
I wanted to briefly interrupt today's interview to give a big shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Buy or sell instantly. Send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. Withdraw straight to cold storage. Even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon, you'll pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and save for retirement, all without leaving the app. Download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com or tap the link in the description below. Use promo code BitcoinNews and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today. Secure your stack with Rhino Bitcoin and enjoy the rest of the video.
I think that's one thing that we try to present on this podcast, that Bitcoin, you shouldn't be scared to spend it, right? You should be comfortable with Bitcoin. You should be able to send a transaction, receive one, and use it as money. It's really magical when you don't just see it as a number on a screen, but are able to trade it for an actual real life good, right? This thing it's money. You should use it. And it is also amazing how Bitcoin meets you where you need it, right? Us in the West, in developed countries, you need a proper store of value. In other countries, you need a proper medium of exchange. So Bitcoin can be many things to many people, but I think everyone should get comfortable with all these different uses of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I would say in Western countries and more developed countries, it's probably going to tend to be more of an asset. You're going to see a lot of people's adoption of it, not as Bitcoin in a self-custodial Jade or cold card, but as something in their retirement portfolio or in a tax advantaged account via an ETF or a Bitcoin Treasury company. And in the developing world, you're going to see people, storing it on their phone and hopefully on a hardware wallet, but using it more as a bearer asset and a cash instrument.
And speaking of Bitcoin treasury companies, you recently warned on X that Bitcoin treasury companies that are led by CEOs who don't really understand Bitcoin, they'll fold at the first major drawdown. Is this a concern that we should have as the Bitcoin community?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that tweet kind of blew up. I didn't expect it would go that big, but apparently people do agree with that sentiment. And it probably has to do with a lot of the follow-on effect of strategy copycats. And you just have more and more companies saying, we're buying Bitcoin. And you don't really know if they understand Bitcoin, right? They may just be following a trend. And you can see the degeneration of that trend too with things like Solana and Ripple treasury companies now too. Like, that's not going to end well, guaranteed. But my concern is like a lot of these companies with people you never know of just saying we're buying Bitcoin. If they don't understand what it is they bought and why Bitcoin is valuable, they're probably going to fold. Or they haven't spent the effort to convince their board to get on board, no pun intended. And they might get pressure from their board to sell when the price goes down a bit. I know one of the big things Michael Saylor did was he spent time educating the strategy board on Bitcoin. So even when there was a downturn, we had a bear market and we went down to like 16K. Strategy was holding through that. So they're able to withstand it because they understood, and Michael understood it, of course. And I think that is something that we have not seen with a lot of the copycats just yet. I still remember when we hit 16K, I texted Michael and I said, are you okay? Do you want to talk? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. So, there's confidence in strategy's ability to weather these dips if there are more dips in the future.
Yeah, Michael has definitely shown the fortitude to hold on throughout the coldest of bear markets. But we have all this demand, right? I think ETFs now hold 1.4 million coins, right? And public companies have 850,000 Bitcoin. So there is all this demand, but it's got people screaming on Twitter, there's got to be paper Bitcoin. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being purchased on an almost daily basis. Why isn't the price exploding? So what do you have to say to all this?
I think there's probably some dimension of paper Bitcoin involved. There could be something shady happening. We just don't know. And it's the same as in the FTX case where we found out after the fact that they were selling Bitcoin that they didn't have. So it's possible, like some exchange and in some, the lesser known exchange is selling paper Bitcoin. And for some reason, there is not a run on that exchange yet. And that could contribute to this. The other theory is that it's simply OGs selling, but I don't know of any OGs that are selling, so it's difficult to really understand exactly what is going on. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility that there is some outright fraud and some exchanges taking advantage of this selling Bitcoin that does not exist.
Do you think that if Bitcoin treasury companies publish their proof of reserves, that would help solve this problem somewhat?
I mean, it's nice to have it, but it doesn't really solve the problem because you don't know their liabilities at any given time. So they may be able to produce the proof of reserves that they have this and it's with Coinbase, but you don't know the full story of if there's rehypothecation or if there's some other deals or there's some claim on their Bitcoin. And yeah, I mean, if every single one did publish the proof of reserves, I think the clarity of the situation would be very much improved. But then you kind of need everyone to do it so you know that no one's double claiming Bitcoin to be held as theirs.
And is Jan3 your company? Are you guys a Bitcoin treasury company?
We do have a Bitcoin treasury. I think we have 12 coins. So nice. As part of our seed fundraising, we put some of that into Bitcoin. I think our price was 85,000 a coin. So our treasury is doing okay.
And another thing that you guys just launched is Jan3 Financial. You guys are doing charts now. Checked out the site. It looks beautiful. What's the main driver behind that?
Right. So Jan3 Financial, I think we launched it quite some time ago, and the charts came out maybe a few weeks ago. But the Jan3 Financial has been operating for some time. It is our financial division, which includes an OTC desk. And we're working on putting together some funds as well. But the goal of Jan3 Financial was that we can service nation states when they want to buy Bitcoin. So we've been building up a track record. We have a number of clients and a few billionaires also, but it's just to create the track record where we can help countries buy Bitcoin in the future. And the charts site is just sort of a distillation of what's happening, especially with ETFs and institutional Bitcoin buys. So we wanted to create a place where investors can go and look and see at a very high level what the trend is and what the accumulation looks like, what the imbalance is between supply and demand, which is pretty high, not including the corporate buys too. So we're working on the next phase of the chart site, which is to include corporate data, so we can present a more holistic view of both ETFs and corporates, and possibly nation states down the road too. So that is all going to contribute to probably a supply shock, a massive one. But where you'll see it is looking at the data on Jan3 financial charts.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Definitely worth checking out. And another thing that you mentioned on that clip with Preston was that you foresaw the tokenization of everything, right? Well, that's sort of taking place now. But we just saw Robinhood release tokenized stocks, right? That's happening now on Solana and some other chains. Do you think that this tokenization of everything is coming to Bitcoin? And what does that world look like?
Yeah, so I would say I'm less certain now and than when I talked to Preston a few years back. And I think it largely has to do with the shifts that we've seen in corporate adoption and the traditional market. So Bitcoin is now far more accessible in traditional stocks, and they have a large lead on tokenized stocks because they're getting easier and easier to trade. The windows of trading times are increasing. And a lot of the more traditional exchanges are looking at ways to tokenize so that they can get fully 24/7 and potentially bearer trading, which I think was the promise of securities, tokenized securities. But yeah, it's interesting to see the route that things have gone. I think Bitfinex Securities has played a large role in driving the tokenized securities narrative, and most of their offerings are on the Liquid network. And in fact, I think almost all of them are. But I believe we're lacking some larger issuances that can drive more attention, because it's like tokenized securities are the worst of both worlds. You have to deal with the bearer aspect of it, and you have less liquidity than the traditional market. So there has to be some big draw to it. And originally I was thinking Bitcoin bonds issued by sovereign states could be a big driver, because you'll have a large pool of liquidity if there's a number of bonds issued, like billions of dollars of liquidity, and interest because it is Bitcoin backed. So basically Bitcoin bonds could have been like Strategy if they were executed on in 2022 or 2023. But I think that ship has sailed, and a lot of the interest now has shifted over to Strategy and its preferred stock offering. So the market for tokenized securities has changed a lot. And then, like you mentioned, you have Robinhood, and they're trying things on Solana and everything like that. But you can see the same thing. They're looking for stocks that people want exposure to, like OpenAI and SpaceX. But I think the key is to find a draw. But I'm still bullish on Liquid for tokenized securities. And I think one thing that could be interesting is tokenization of all the Bitcoin Treasury companies, which has already happened. So there's CMSTR, and there is, I think, tokenized H100 as well. I'm not sure about Alt BG, but Stoker, which is a Liquid member, they've been working with a large number of companies to tokenize these. So if there is enough demand for exposure to these tokenized stocks, then I think a marketplace like Bitfinex Securities or others could come up and allow for trading of those. So you might see it blow up in the future.
24/7 tokenized stock offerings. The degens are going crazy. But one thing you mentioned is bit bonds, right? You were a instrumental part of the idea of the volcano bonds, and now we hear the idea of bit bonds happening over at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Do you think that this will be adopted by countries, and what is their interest in this?
I think countries definitely need to do it, but again, the dynamic has changed a lot in the last few months, maybe the last year. And again, it is largely because of strategy. So I think strategy is largely what I had in mind for sovereign Bitcoin bonds or volcano bonds, where you would issue dollar debt, back it with Bitcoin, and get this flywheel going, and use proceeds to buy Bitcoin. So it's changed a lot. I think there's still opportunity probably for the US to do bit bonds. For developing countries, that ship might have sailed by now, because that it is sovereign debt. It's not decentralized in any way. So you have to look at the credit rating and credit worthiness of a lot of these countries. And would you have bought triple B or C rated debt from a LATAM country if it was backed by Bitcoin? Maybe a few years ago, but you have strategy now with very similar offerings, especially with Strife. And if the US does issue bit bonds, then you basically have, either triple B or low A rated US sovereign debt backed with Bitcoin, which is superior in almost every way to, I don't know, a Bitcoin bond from a LATAM country that is struggling, right? So if the US does move ahead, then I think that might be the nail in the coffin for Bitcoin bonds elsewhere. There just won't be demand for it unless they find a way to increase the yield, but then that comes with its own risks.
And so in the next 5 years, I mean, you said that the countries are going to need to act fast, right? And we see these companies moving first. And we've got Jesse over at OnRamp saying that corporations will have over 50% of all the Bitcoin. Do you think that that is a realistic option, something that will play out in the future? And would that be good for Bitcoin if it was so?
I mean, 50% of 21 million?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's difficult. I'm actually surprised that Strategy has close to 600,000 now. I would have thought they would have topped out at like 400 maybe, because the price would have went up a lot and they would be able to buy a lot less. But surprise, we're here. So, can companies get 10 million Bitcoin? First, no, because I think by my estimates, we've probably lost like 5 million coins. So there's probably maybe 16 million coins out there with a bit under 1 million to be mined still. So I would say maybe the best case scenario is corporations end up with 3 million coins, and you have governments with another few million, and then the rest is just held by individuals.
Yeah, and speaking of individuals, this Treasury craze over the last year, 2 years, it sort of changed the dynamic of the conversation, right? I remember 2021 Bitcoin Twitter, it was more punk rock, it was more raucous, and now it's much more the suit coiners are here. How would you say that the culture has changed over the years that you've been in Bitcoin?
It's evolved, I would say. But I don't think it's reasonable to expect it's always going to be punk rock, or I prefer alternative rock, for forever and ever and ever. Like, if Bitcoin was to be valuable, it's inevitable that governments and corporations will want it, just like in human history. Anything that's valuable, people in power will want it. And they don't really get to dictate the creation of value. And they have, I guess you could say, with fiat, but that experiment is drawing to a close very rapidly. So we're going back to hard money. And everyone wants hard money, whether you're a pleb or a podcaster or a corporation or a nation state. That's just how it works. Money makes the world go around. Money is the base layer of civilization. So, having the suits come, so to speak, is an inevitability. And I think you have to be okay with that. Like, I think people often get mixed up in their anarchist libertarian view of what could be, but you're never really going to get rid of governments, at least not for the time being. But separation of money and state will result in smaller governments and less powerful governments and more powerful people, like more powerful plebs. So I think that is a good rebalancing of the situation. But yeah, it's going to evolve, and it will continue to evolve as people want Bitcoin. I don't see the corporate Bitcoin craze going away, simply because it is not about retail investors. Like, maybe there are some that target retail investors, and maybe that's not ideal. But by and large, if you look at strategy, their target is not retail investors. They're targeting institutional grade investors. They're targeting the bond market, the fixed income markets. And it's very obvious with their preferred shares, right? And people can participate, but that's not who the main focus is. And I think if there are more treasury companies and they are targeting and trying to arbitrage between the legacy system and the new Bitcoin system, that is a good thing to have in play. And it's not necessarily bad for Bitcoin. It's just different. But if you think hyper-Bitcoinization is inevitable, then this is part of that flow and that process.
Yeah, I agree with you that this is natural progression. Corporations going to want it. They're going to want to protect their balance sheets, and that it just attracts a whole entire different group of people and mindsets into the space. And where Bitcoiners are known to be quite argumentative, and so you're going to see that pop up. But I think it's all par for the course. The real question here is what's the real mission, right? And the real mission, at least from my point of view, is to separate money from state. And when you are talking to representatives of governments, I mean, the power to print money is one of their greatest abilities, right? So do you ever get to that level of conversation of separating money from state? And have you ever seen them have the light bulb go on and realize, oh, Bitcoin could do that?
I would say no, we haven't really had those discussions, and I don't think it's a productive discussion to have. It's better to focus on the ways that Bitcoin can benefit them. Like, if you look at Bhutan, I think a lot of the work on Bitcoin adoption there was driven by mining companies. I think Bitmain that went there early on, and I don't think they said, if you mine Bitcoin, you'll separate money from state. It was more like, you have excess energy, you can mine Bitcoin, and do things, build the roads, build airports, whatever you need. And that's sort of the more practical, pragmatic approach, I would say, than saying this separates money from state and getting into that whole discussion. In fact, like most discussions we have as Jan 3, we try not to talk too much about the technicals and even things like the 21 million limit, unless we're saying it's scarce and trying to drive home a point there. But it's just framing Bitcoin as something that can help them with their current problems is far more likely to lead to the adoption of Bitcoin rather than trying to drive it by exerting our political or philosophical motives.
Yes, a sly and roundabout way, right? That's what we need. And zooming back out to America and the debt situation we have here, right? We just passed $37 trillion. The big, beautiful bill was passed, and Ray Dalio made a post today about how we're looking at government spending of $7 trillion a year, and on a good year, we'll bring in $5 trillion of tax revenue, right? This debt issue is a serious problem. And do you think that is the main catalyst that will cause this rapid repricing of Bitcoin any day now?
Well, I think the rapid repricing is just waiting right now to happen. You have the ETFs, which eliminate all the barriers to Bitcoin acquisition. In previous cycles, you always had a bottleneck with exchanges onboarding people and companies, right? They would just get bottlenecked for months. But with the ETFs, that bottleneck is gone. It's just money will flow in anytime. It's like a portal to TradFi money. And then you have the demand from all the corporations. You have nation states starting to line up and go through their own processes to allow for accumulation. So all of that combined with the current financial system and all of the money printing from past decades, more pertinently probably from the last 5 years, is all coming to a head. So even without the big beautiful bill, like Bitcoin will explode to the upside. But the big beautiful bill just guarantees it, in fact. So nothing really stops the train, in the words of Lynn Alden. So yeah, I think the big beautiful bill should open some more eyes and accelerate the takeoff or the liftoff of the Bitcoin rocket. Because if you look at what Ray Dalio is posting, 7 trillion a year translates to about 64 million BTC. So 3-ish Bitcoin networks are going to be spent per year. So you can kind of figure out and reason out that Bitcoin is cheap right now at $110,000-ish a coin.
Yeah, and we are expecting Omega candles, right? Michael Saylor said that 21 million Bitcoin price in 21 years. And you said for that to happen, you need to go up $1 million a year.
On average. On average.
So do you think that if we were to get to 21 million, are we in this new like stair step up grind for Bitcoin where we don't see the same bear markets as before and we're just moving up, or you're all in the S curve adoption, right?
Yeah, one of our team members did like some analysis, and like 56% of all corporate Bitcoin buys happened in the last few months. So that's not an indication that we're going to stair step up. And if you look at Strategy alone, their acquisition is accelerating. So I just can't see the stair step up. Stair step up is a graceful ascent, and it violates the principle of max pain theory, which is the thing that's most likely to happen is what inflicts the most pain on the most number of people. And that is that everyone misses the boat because they weren't paying attention, or they thought Bitcoin was expensive, or they just thought Bitcoin is going to go away. So stair step up means everyone has time to learn. They're going to watch as it goes up, a little bit every day, gradually for the next 21 years. And that's just unlikely in my book. It seems like we're reaching corporate FOMO, we're going to get nation state FOMO, and then retail FOMO. And all of that's going to mean a very steep adoption curve.
And we have that event that causes that repricing of Bitcoin. What does that world look like for you? Do you expect your phone to be ringing off the hook of governments finally realizing, oh, wow, we need to get our hands on this and coming to you for more?
Well, we do see a lot more interest now, but the question is, how fast can governments move? And the answer is not that fast. So even if you look at cities, the speed at which a city can adopt a Bitcoin treasury is slow too. Like the city of Vancouver is looking towards that. Mayor Ken Sim has been pushing for the city to adopt, but it'll take maybe another 8 to 12 months of research, presentations to the board, and then possibly passing some bylaws or whatnot to allow them to have Bitcoin in a treasury. And this is a lot of red tape to cross. And it's the same for countries, if not worse.
And so once we cross that chasm, what does the world look like? What does the Hyperbitcoinized world look like, feel like? What is the nature of work and relations amongst people?
Well, there are varying differing opinions on this. I think we hit Hyperbitcoinization somewhere at 0.5 million a coin, and we start devaluing gold and or demonetizing gold and real estate, which are both massive chunks of the global wealth. And Bitcoin goes up very quickly to 1 million, 2, 3. And at that point, nobody will take dollars for payment. So you won't be able to buy a TV or a car with fiat money. They'll say, oh, we want Bitcoin. And what it looks like for the average person is that they'll just be paid in sats. So you'll be earning, 20 sats an hour for minimum wage or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's wild. We just hit 911 sats per dollar tonight as we're recording. So looking ahead towards the rest of 2025, what's on the docket for you and Jan 3?
We have a lot more meetings lined up. Hopefully, we'll get somewhere with some nation state adoption, and maybe we'll see some more interesting things on the corporate adoption front. We'll see. I think there are interesting opportunities out there that I've been talking to people about, and probably a lot more Aqua push. Like so far, we haven't really pushed Aqua. We've been focused on stabilizing, fixing bugs, but we are rolling out a new UI, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, TM, and that will encompass some localization push as well. So like all the adoption we have right now is like with half done localization, and we haven't really done a proper job of that. But once we have that and we have all the bug fixes, the big focus will be on integrations, local integrations in different countries to allow on and off ramping, buying and selling Bitcoin, peer-to-peer Bitcoin trading, and tapping into local I guess, government rails like SimPay in Costa Rica and Pix in Brazil. So a lot of utility, but I have high hopes for Aqua this year. I think our aim is to reach 1 million users, which is a big goal, but we'll try.
No, that's amazing. I mean, just from the UX and now this Dolphin card, I mean, you guys are really pushing forward where Bitcoin is needed, right? You're filling a need in the market, and that's how things get explosive.
Yeah, I think we're a bit different. So we're okay with corporates and governments adopting Bitcoin. We're actively advising governments and fielding questions and engaging with them. But at the same time, the real value of Bitcoin is the grassroots level and ordinary people using it. So we're also fueling that part of the growth cycle as well.
Yeah, and if you've talked to lots of people around the world and orange pilled many. If you had to give one piece of advice of how someone who is a Bitcoiner could talk to somebody who isn't, whether it's friend, family, colleague, what is the best way to onboard someone into Bitcoin in 2025?
I mean, it seems like a no-brainer for us, but the best way is to say, look at the equity markets, look at BlackRock, and just analyze their growth with their ETF over the last year, and how much it contributes to their revenue. And there's not really much else to say. But BlackRock is the largest asset manager on the planet, and Bitcoin is their new unicorn, so to speak. And if that doesn't convince you, then nothing else can, really.
Yeah.
For a normal person, right? Like you can try first principles and explaining the origin of money, why bearer assets are important, devaluation, all those things. But I think that's just harder. It takes a lot more effort to understand that, because most people have been inoculated and grown up in a fiat system where they just assume dollars on their screen in their bank is money. And that's really harder to break out of. It's easier to show them the economics for like something like BlackRock or strategy even. You can look at that and it's more relatable. And then they should question why they're seeing that level of growth and why it's transformed them.
Absolutely. Number go up is the best salesman for the mass market. And it feels like we're right at the cusp of that. So it's very exciting to see how the rest of this year will play out. And global liquidity is rising and Bitcoin is sure to follow. Well, yes, Samson, I want to thank you so much for your time, for joining us this evening. It's been a wonderful conversation. If people want more about Jan 3 or Aqua or anything that you're doing, where should they go?
We're on X. Jan3.com is our handle, and you can check our website out, jan3.com as well. And we're basically on every social platform.
Cool. Yes. Go out, download Aqua, play around with it. It's super simple, fun, and easy to use, and a great way to orange pill other people, right? Get them on board. Cheers, Samson. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.